Have you ever wondered why some leaders seem to flourish effortlessly, while others, who are just as knowledgeable, absolutely struggle when the spotlight arrives?
Yeah, it is a fascinating dynamic. I mean, we see it all the time.
Right, you look at their resume and on paper, they are totally flawless.
Exactly. Bulletproof. But then they step into the real pressure of leadership and they just fold.
Well, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are jumping into a really profound, extensive document titled From Trainee to Field Practitioner.
And it is a fantastic source. It really gets into the weeds of leadership development.
It does. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore this kind of uncomfortable reality that we see in the text. The fact that mastery of theory alone just does not create an effective leader.
Right.
So over the next little while, we are going to explore the spiritual, the emotional, and the really practical journey of bridging the gap between simply knowing about leadership and actually embodying it under pressure.
Which is such a massive difference.
It really is. And for you listening, whether you are currently prepping for a new role or leading a highly complex team, or maybe you are just feeling stuck in a season where it feels like absolutely no one sees your hard work, this deep dive is going to totally reframe how you view your own preparation and purpose.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
So let's get right into the text. The source material spends a lot of time up front exploring this concept it calls the gap. What exactly is this gap, and why is it so dangerous?
Well, the text defines the gap as this really expansive, often painful space between having theoretical clarity and actually having lived spiritual maturity.
Okay.
It's basically the distance between knowing the principles of leadership and having the capacity to actually live them out when you are under severe pressure.
Right, because the modern instinct is just, if you read enough books, leadership naturally follows.
Exactly. We think input equals output. But the text argues a totally different principle. It says, knowledge informs, but only experience transforms.
Wow. Knowledge informs, but only experience transforms. Okay, let's unpack this. Why does knowledge alone fail so spectacularly when the pressure hits?
Because knowledge, no matter how good it is, it cannot simulate pressure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A textbook just cannot simulate pain or human complexity. The text actually references James chapter 1, verse 22, which warns against the self-deception of being hearers only.
Right, like don't just listen to the word, do what it says.
Exactly. And the author points out that if you only share the concepts, you actively deceive yourself. You build this false confidence.
If you look in the mirror and think you're ready, but you're really untested.
Yeah. And the text contrasts Jesus with the Pharisees here, which is really interesting.
Oh, right, because we usually think of the Pharisees as just the villains.
Right. But their tragedy wasn't ignorance. They were incredibly knowledgeable. They had massive doctrinal clarity.
Right, they knew all the rules.
But there was a total disconnection between knowing and doing. They had public religious competence, but completely lacked inward spiritual substance.
Yeah, they couldn't even see basic human mercy standing right in front of them.
Exactly.
It's like reading a comprehensive manual on how to swim, passing a written test, and then just being thrown into a stormy ocean.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right, because the lecture hall can teach you the definition of shepherding, but only the field reveals if you can actually sit with wounded sheep when the night is long.
Yeah, and the source gives a really specific, heartbreaking example of this.
Oh, the young pastor.
Yes, the young pastor. So imagine a young leader with a shiny new diploma.
Top of their class.
Top of their class, flawlessly crafted sermons, super articulate. But then a family in their congregation experiences a sudden, devastating loss.
Oh, man.
And this young pastor goes to visit them. They sit down in the living room, and suddenly, in the face of raw, unfiltered human grief, all those textbook answers just feel completely inadequate.
Right. Because you can't just hand a grieving parent a theological textbook.
No, you can't. The sheer weight of the room crushes the theory.
And the text also mentions a mission trainee, right?
Yeah, a trainee arriving in a poverty-stricken community.
Right, they show up with their perfect sociological strategy.
Exactly. And they realize within a week that they can't just solve it. You can't just drop a textbook strategy onto a neighborhood and fix complex human trauma.
Yeah, because people aren't case studies.
Exactly. You have to earn trust slowly. So the clean theory gets really messy in reality.
So if the classroom cannot simulate the pressure needed to bridge this gap, where does that necessary formation actually happen?
Well, according to the text, it happens in a place modern culture desperately tries to avoid.
Which
Obscurity. The shadow.
Okay, yes, the theology of the shadow. That sounds kind of ominous.
It does sound ominous, but the text actually frames it as a profoundly sacred season. It argues that God develops leaders in hidden seasons, not for inactivity, but for intentional preparation.
Right, so the shadow isn't God ignoring you.
Not at all. It's actually proof of his nearness. The text references Psalm 91, verse 1, about dwelling in the secret place, under the shadow of the Almighty.
Oh, because to be in someone's shadow, you have to be standing incredibly close to them.
Exactly. It's proximity. You are shielded from the heat of premature visibility.
That is such a good way to look at it. And the text goes through all these biblical examples, right?
Yeah, the pattern is everywhere. Think about David.
Right. David and Goliath.
But before Goliath, David was a shepherd in the fields for years, fighting lions and bears with absolutely no audience.
Just him and the sheep.
Exactly. And Moses, he spent 40 years in Midian unlearning his Egyptian self-reliance.
40 years in the desert. That's a long shadow.
It is. And Paul withdrew to Arabia. Joseph was forged in a literal prison. The shadow is where false identity is dismantled. It forces you to answer the question, who are you when no one is watching?
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back a bit. Modern leadership culture tells us the exact opposite. It says build a platform, maximize visibility, network constantly. So isn't this shadow phase just a fancy term for being stuck or sidelined or just lacking ambition?
This raises an important question, and the author actually anticipates this exact tension. To answer it, the text points us to a really brilliant insight about Jesus' own baptism.
Okay, break that down for me.
So think about the timeline. Jesus is baptized, and the Father speaks audibly from heaven, declaring his identity. This is my beloved Son.
Right, the ultimate public endorsement. And this is before he even performed a single miracle?
Exactly. His identity is secured before the work begins. But what happens immediately after?
He goes into the wilderness.
Right. He is led into the wilderness to be tested by the enemy, and the enemy attacks that exact identity if you are the Son of God.
Wow. So he had to be tested in the shadow.
Yes. The text argues that if your identity isn't secured in the hiddenness, it will be absolutely assaulted and fractured in the visibility. Because visibility doesn't create character.
Visibility simply amplifies whatever is beneath the surface.
Precisely.
So if you have deep insecurities, getting a promotion is just going to make you a paranoid, controlling leader.
Exactly. The success is what will destroy you.
Which means the ultimate goal of this painful hidden refinement is to completely shift a leader's foundation from their external abilities to their internal substance.
Right.
And this leads directly to what the text calls the ultimate kingdom leadership reversal, which is character over competence.
Yes. And this is a massive shift from how our corporate culture works today. We value competence above everything because it's visible and gets immediate results.
Right. We want the visionary, the dynamic speaker.
But the text says that while competence builds momentum, character is the only thing that sustains a legacy.
Okay, so let me jump in with an analogy here.
Go for it.
So competence is like the engine of a sports car, right?
Right.
It gives you speed, it gives you momentum, it's flashy. But character is the chassis. It's the frame. And if you put a massive 800 horsepower engine on a weak, rusted out chassis, what happens?
The car falls apart.
Yeah, it literally tears itself apart at high speeds. The success, the speed, is what destroys it.
That's a great way to picture it. And the author points to the Apostle Paul's instructions in 1 Timothy chapter 3 to back this up.
Oh, the leadership qualifications list.
Yes. And what is striking about that list is what is completely missing from it.
What's missing?
Charisma, creativity, strategic brilliance. None of that is on the list.
Oh, wait, none of it.
Nope. The focus is almost entirely on character. Being sober-minded, self-controlled, not quarrelsome.
That sounds more like being a good neighbor than a global leader.
Right. But in the kingdom, leadership is representational. Under sustained pressure, your competence is going to falter, you will get tired. And that's when the true inner life is exposed.
Yeah, without character, your influence just becomes manipulation.
Exactly.
Mm.
And the text contrasts King Saul and King David to show this.
Oh, this is a good comparison. Because Saul was super confident, right?
Extremely competent. He looked the part, he had military victories, but internally he had unchecked insecurity.
Right, he was always worried about his image.
Yes, and that led to his collapse. David, on the other hand, had grievous, terrible flaws. But he had responsiveness. He had a pliable heart and a willingness to repent.
So character isn't about being perfect. It's about how you respond when you fail.
Exactly. The source actually uses a modern example of this called the two leaders.
Walk me through that.
So the first leader rises incredibly fast because they are highly gifted, but they have unresolved pride. They hate criticism.
So they have the massive engine, but no chassis.
Right. And eventually, the pressure fractures them. They implode.
And the second leader.
The second leader develops really slowly. They embrace accountability. They take harsh feedback, and they lead with quiet confidence. They do the hard work in the shadow.
Okay, so we all want to be the second leader. But how do you actually cultivate that kind of bulletproof character when the external rewards aren't there? I mean, it's hard to just sit in obscurity.
It is hard. And the text says you can't just self-generate this character. It must be drawn from a deeper well.
Which requires a radical reorientation of the soul, right?
Yes. And that brings us to the next core concept, intimacy before influence.
Intimacy before influence. I love that.
Yeah, the text asserts that public power flows entirely from private communion.
And it points to Jesus for this, right?
Constantly. I mean, Jesus was always withdrawing from the pressing crowds to pray.
Even when he was at the height of his popularity.
Exactly. He didn't live from public demand, he lived from private union.
But the text makes a really sharp distinction here between performing for God and walking with God.
Yes, and this is crucial. Performing for God is transactional. It's driven by anxiety and outcomes.
Like checking the boxes to prove your worth.
Right. And the text calls this mechanical ministry. You are maintaining the schedule, preaching the sermons, but inwardly you are completely drying out.
Wow, mechanical ministry. That is a terrifying phrase. So what does this all mean for the daily grind? Because I feel like the pressure of real-world demands would make this kind of intimacy feel like a luxury, not a necessity.
Well, the author shares a story of a pastor who slowed down to illustrate exactly this tension.
Tell me about this pastor.
So this pastor was highly capable, but was leading entirely from pressure, not presence. And they realized their sermons felt totally hollow.
They were burning out.
Yeah. So they made this radical decision to just step back and recover unhurried prayer and silence.
And what happened? Did the church double in size overnight?
No, actually, there was absolutely no immediate public applause.
Right.
But gradually over time, their words became weightier, their counsel became more compassionate.
Because they weren't leading out of anxiety anymore.
Exactly. And the text points out that true spiritual authority doesn't need to announce itself. People quietly recognize it.
Yeah, just like the Israelites could see Moses' face shining when he came down the mountain. They knew he had been with God.
Precisely.
And when your identity and strength are firmly rooted in this quiet intimacy, your perspective completely changes.
Yeah.
You stop waiting for someone to hand you a title.
Yes, which leads us to the kingdom reversal of responsibility before recognition.
I love this concept. Break this down for us.
So in the world, recognition comes first. You are given a promotion, a title, and then you are trusted with the weight of the job.
Right, you get the corner office first.
But in the kingdom, responsibility and hidden obedience come first. Recognition is just the echo of a life that's already been proven in secret.
Recognition is the echo. That's powerful.
It is. The text highlights Luke chapter 16, verse 10. Faithful in little is faithful in much.
Because small things reveal the heart.
Exactly. The text explains that waiting to be seen is actually a spiritual trap. We disguise our fear as humility and our insecurity as passivity.
Oh, like saying, well, I don't want to overstep until I'm officially in charge.
Right. But leadership is a posture, not a position.
Yeah, it's like an understudy refusing to learn their lines until their name is on the marquee.
Exactly.
But the text emphasizes that David didn't wait for a crown to fight the lion and the bear. He took responsibility for the sheep already in front of him.
Yeah, and the author shares this great story of the quiet servant.
Oh yeah, tell that one.
It's about a person with absolutely no title in an organization. But they set up the chairs, they check on the elderly, they remember names.
They just do the work.
Right. And then, when a crisis hits that requires real wisdom, everyone naturally looks to them.
Even though they don't have the title.
Because responsibility had already been shaping them all along. The recognition was just catching up.
Wow. But eventually, once a person embraces hidden responsibility, they do have to step out into the wider, messy world.
They do.
So how is that transition managed? Because going from the shadow to the spotlight is where a lot of people crash.
It is. And the text points to the ultimate biblical blueprint for learning on the fly, which it calls the Book of Acts blueprint.
Learning in motion.
Exactly. The deep dive turns to the Apostle Paul's missionary journeys. The early church wasn't a sterile classroom. It was a movement.
Right, the rhythm was just go, preach, encounter a riot, adapt, multiply, repeat.
Yeah. And Paul didn't separate his companions from the mission to join them. He formed them through shared mission.
Because unpredictable environments strip you of the illusion of control.
Yes, and it forces absolute dependence on the Holy Spirit.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Hmm.
The text talks about Paul's ability to adapt without compromise,
Right.
whether he was with Jews or Greeks or philosophers.
Right.
But how do you adapt to different crowds without watering down your core message? Isn't that a massive risk for a trainee to try and do that?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly why shared mission is required. Apprentices like Timothy didn't just hear about this, they had to watch Paul navigate it.
Oh, they watched him translate the truth without diluting it.
Exactly. They learned that the gospel is unchanging, but the expression of it is totally flexible.
That makes a lot of sense.
And they also learned from watching Paul get imprisoned and rejected that resistance does not mean failure.
Right, which rewrites the whole modern definition of success.
It really does. The text paints this vivid picture of an apprentice on a journey. They start by just carrying bags.
Right, doing the grunt work.
Then they are asked to pray out loud, then they share a testimony. And through that, they discover firsthand how hard it is to speak courageously.
Or how fast pride bubbles up after a success.
Yes. You can't learn that in a lecture. You need the friction of the road.
But surviving the friction of this road, the resistance, the adaptations, dealing with people that will completely break a leader if their internal landscape isn't fortified.
Which brings us to the final crucial test in the text. Spiritual and emotional readiness.
The inner crucible.
Exactly. Emotional readiness is the inner stability that sustains faithful ministry. Because ministry is inherently relational.
Which means criticism is guaranteed.
Criticism, conflict, delay, disappointment, it is all guaranteed.
Right.
The text explores how to handle criticism without losing your identity. It references Galatians chapter 1, verse 10, about not seeking the approval of man.
And James chapter 1, quick to listen, slow to speak.
Right. Emotionally ready leaders are able to separate their core identity from the evaluation they are receiving.
Because their worth is already anchored.
Exactly. And it also covers missional readiness, the willingness to sacrifice comfort and carry a genuine burden for the lost.
Right, understanding that mission involves descent before it involves impact, like Philippians 2 says. I really want to jump in here with an analogy. Emotional readiness is like the shock absorbers on a car.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. The bumps, the potholes, the harsh criticism, those are just guaranteed on the road of leadership.
Yeah.
Emotional maturity doesn't magically remove the bumps.
No, it doesn't.
It absorbs the impact. It dissipates the kinetic energy so the passengers, that the people you are leading, don't get whiplash every time you hit a bump.
That is a perfect illustration. And the text contrasts two individuals who face the exact same criticism to prove this point.
Oh yeah, let's look at that.
So one leader lacks emotional readiness. When they get harsh feedback, they interpret it as personal rejection. They get defensive, they withdraw.
The bump breaks the axle, the team gets whiplash.
Exactly. But the second leader pauses. They pray. They consider if the feedback is valid, and they respond calmly.
Because they have the shock absorbers.
Yes. The external pressure was identical, but the internal readiness dictated a totally different outcome.
Man, that is so powerful. So let's just recap the journey we've been on.
It's been quite a ride.
It really has.
Yeah.
We started by identifying the gap between theory and practice, and we explored how that gap is bridged in the sacred shadow by building character over competence.
Right.
And we talk about how intimacy with God fuels all of that, which leads to taking quiet responsibility.
And finally, how learning in motion forges those emotional shock absorbers we just talked about.
Exactly. So for you listening, if you are in a season that feels totally unseen or ordinary or overwhelmingly difficult, please don't rush past the shadow.
Don't try to network your way out of it.
Right. The lack of visibility isn't a detour, it's a design. Your current obscurity is your proving ground.
It's where the chassis is built.
Exactly. But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Okay.
The source material brilliantly notes that success is stewarded with faithfulness. But think about this. We spend so much time preparing our character to survive obscurity, delay, and rejection.
Which is hard enough on its own.
Right. But what if the ultimate test of a field practitioner isn't how they handle failure? What if the real test is how they handle sudden, massive success?
Oh.
Does a sudden leap into the spotlight pose an even greater threat to the inner life than a prolonged season in the shadows? Because if you have cracks in your chassis, sudden success will absolutely tear you apart. something to really think about as you continue your own deep dive.
That is a very profound question to end on.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
See you next time.